industry. If many of you recall, last session, legislators voted on interim studies, ranked your studies in order you wanted to see them completed. Third highest ranked was the study on pharmacy costs, prescription drugs, why the costs are going up. As the auditor's office, we regulate insurance. We're intimately involved with that process, so we kind of stepped up and helped your interim committee process that study. So we've been doing research on this industry, on this issue, for over a year, about a year and a half. I will tell you, in a year and a half of relatively full-time work, we don't have all the answers. We don't know everything. The system is just as complex as you ever thought it was. And we're going to give you, we just spent the last week trying to figure out how to make the most complex thing I've ever seen simple enough for you to understand it. So forgive us if we didn't nail it on every point, but we also have some folks here who, like I said, the researchers who've been doing it for the last 18 months or so. If you want deeper dive questions, we can answer those questions for you. So we're going to give it to you as best we can, visually, verbally. It still won't all make sense. We're going to throw a lot of stuff at you quickly. I'm going to talk fast. Janelle's going to talk fast. Marilyn always talks fast. So we're going to move pretty fast on this thing. But hopefully by the end, you'll have enough to understand that the cost of prescription drugs are too high. And we are going to bring them down. We're not going to say anymore. You hear talking points all the time. Somebody needs to do something about that. Somebody needs to do something about it. Why are they so high? Let's study it. No, not anymore. We are actually in a position where we can take a huge first step and you can start to bring the cost of prescription drugs down. So, again, just disclaimering it, we cannot answer all your questions in this presentation. We may not have hit all the points the way you would have liked us to hit them, but we can explain what we're talking about. We can stay afterwards. We will meet with you at any time. We can hit you with piles of information, lots and lots of research. So with that, we're going to start quickly. We're going to move quickly. Hang on.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matthew Rosendale, and currently I'm serving as the Commissioner of Securities and Insurance for the state of Montana, working out of the State Auditor's office. As Chris just said, we're going to present a lot of information to you today, and we're going to be available throughout this entire session to help you with not only this piece of legislation, but with any other legislation that touches the insurance or securities industry to be a resource for you. What I would like to do right now is introduce the folks that are also going to be presenting this afternoon for you. I have my Deputy Auditor who you just saw, Chris Hansen. I have one of the staff attorneys here, Ace Lager, who's going to be presenting. I have the Special Projects Coordinator, Marilyn Bartlett, who's done an incredible amount of work on this. And I also have Janelle Williams. Janelle Williams, who's another staff attorney, who is very familiar with this industry and this process, which she's been working on it for several years. Since I was sworn into the auditor's office, I made the cost of healthcare reduction my primary goal, expanding access to healthcare, primary goals. And so as we've gone through the last several years trying to find places where we can move the cost of healthcare, what we found is that pharmaceuticals are the fastest growing segment of the industry that is taking place right now. Healthcare is going up, it's going up rapidly, but pharmaceuticals are going up faster than any other segment. They are right now consuming about 20% of the healthcare dollars. And so, once we identified that, I charged staff with finding out why. Find the pressure points, find the cost points that are driving this industry. So we have spent the last 18 months gathering data from, quite frankly, unwilling partners that we actually had to take court action to extract this information from. In many cases, they do not want us to see what is taking place. And so we have been able to gather the data and establish what is going on. What I would like to do is use an analogy that it will help you to understand this. It's like contracting someone to build a home for you, and you contract with an individual, with the general contractor, and then they bring in all types of subcontractors for electrical work, for plumbing work, for painting, for hanging cabinets, whatever. But your point of contact is with that one general contractor. And they are responsible to you and have a fiduciary responsibility to you. And you're oblivious to everything else that's taking place over there. That's what's going on with the healthcare industry, with the pharmaceuticals. There are all these other players that are taking place, and they like it that way. They do it intentionally because it gives them the ability to operate in this veil of secrecy so that it gives them plausible deniability that they don't know what's going on, that they don't know about these prices. And so we have brought that information together. You're going to have other pieces of legislation that are going to be brought forth this session that are going to talk about transparency. Senator Fitzpatrick presented one yesterday. We are supporting that as well. But this, Senate Bill 71, which is being carried by Senator Olszewski, who's been working very closely with us, is the only one that is going to go directly at the cost of pharmaceuticals. And with that, I'll turn it over to the team. Proceed.
All right. What's on the board and on the floor? Okay, so I'm going to stand back here so that I can talk from behind you and you can look at the screen. We're going to go through a quick PowerPoint presentation for you. Fly through these slides pretty fast, give you some basic definitions, basics for the system itself, the things you need to know. And then, because it's so complicated, I told you, we spent the last week trying to figure out how to show it to you. Then we're going to stop the PowerPoint, move over to the whiteboard, and try to draw it for you. So, like I said, hang in there. So, the basics of the system. You have drugs. You have brand drugs. Brand drugs are marketed under proprietary trademark protected name under patent protection. They're patent protected. They're usually fairly expensive. You have generic drugs. Generic drugs are essentially the equivalent of a brand drug, but they've lost their patent protection. So other manufacturers can build them, manufacture them, sell them. And generally, the generics are supposed to be a little bit cheaper. Next. You have specialty drugs. Specialty drugs are drugs approved by the FDA to treat complex conditions. A lot of times these drugs have a special delivery mechanism, they have special refrigeration requirements, they have all kinds of things that make them fragile, damageable, very expensive. One of the conditions you might be aware of that a specialty drug is required to treat is rheumatoid arthritis. This slide is inexplicable. We're showing it to you because you need to understand that when you ask us what is the cost of a drug, we can't answer the question because the cost of the drug will be determined by one of these or multiple of these pricing methodologies applied at various points throughout the system. And yeah, just remember that there are pricing methodologies, and I can't answer your question when you say how much does this drug cost. Formulary. The formulary is key to this, is a very big key to the whole process, to the whole system. And a formulary is very, very simply a list of prescription drugs that the insurer will cover. So if you have an insurance plan, you have insurance coverage, you have pharmacy benefit that your insurer will provide you prescriptions and pay for part of those prescriptions. The formulary is the list that your insurer will cover. Generally speaking, pharmacy benefit managers will negotiate a formulary. They will negotiate with the manufacturers and the wholesalers to have particular drugs strategically placed on this list. This is an example of what a formulary may look like. You have, generally speaking, I just went through brand, prescription, specialty types of drugs with you. And the formulary itself will consist of tiers. You have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, etc. Tier 1 might be your preferred generics. Tier 2, your generics. Tier 3, your preferred brands. Tier 4, your non-preferred brands. Tier 5, your specialties. You will have variations in this depending on who your insurer is and who their PBM is. But generally speaking, if you go to a pharmacy, Walgreens, Safeway, wherever you go, depending on whether that pharmacy is part of a network, and whether they're preferred, where their drug is on the formulary, you may have your drug cost you $2 because it's a preferred generic for a 30-day supply. However, if your drug was listed as a tier 4, as a non-preferred, the same drug at the same pharmacy might cost you $95 for a 35-day supply, as the consumer who goes to the pharmacy and pays their copay. That's what we're talking about. How much you pay for your drug. Okay, so why is the formulary important to you people as consumers? If your drug is not on the formulary, your insurance doesn't pay for it, which means that you, as a consumer, pay cash, or you have to ask for a sort of waiver from your insurance company to get your drug covered through this arduous sort of exception process. Second most important thing about why this formulary is important to you as a consumer is where your drug is placed in the tiers, which is what I just told you about. If your drug is a generic preferred, it's probably going to cost you significantly less than if your drug is a non-preferred generic. Okay, so that was the basics of stuff you need to know, things we're going to refer to here in a second. Now we're going to actually talk to you about the system. And what the next couple slides will be what you actually see of the system itself, tip of the iceberg. So you, as a consumer, get sick. You go to the doctor prescribes you a drug, you go to your pharmacy and purchase it, you go home and go to bed. In the back of your head, you might have some recognition that a drug manufacturer made your medicine and got it delivered to the pharmacy. If you really think about it, you might also think that, okay, I paid a $5 copay for my drug, and my insurance company had to pay the rest. I paid my insurance company a premium for them to do this. But that's where the simplicity of the system ends. What you don't see, what you haven't even thought about, what you had no idea was happening, is what's next. The iceberg is floating under the water. So what this little slide is just meant to indicate for you, you see at the top the two white things, the patient and the doctor. That's who you really understand. The gray ones, the insurer, the drug manufacturer, the pharmacy. You're familiar with those just a little bit. Everything in black below the water are the middlemen who make up the system. PBMs, wholesalers, labelers, repackagers, aggregators, auditors, brokers, stockists, GPOs, PSAOs, marketers, warehousers. The list goes on. This is not conclusive. Technical difficulties. Okay, so now I told you we're talking about the system now. Now we need to understand that there are two sides of the system. Generally speaking, two sides of the system. You have the supply side and you have the payment side. The supply side middlemen are as follows. Biggest, probably most obvious one is the wholesaler. Wholesaler is an entity that purchases the drugs from the manufacturer and moves them to the pharmacy. In the middle of the wholesaler's transaction, several other things happen to get your drug from the manufacturer to the pharmacy. For setting the stage for some of the payment and some of the money components of this, 90% of drug distribution goes to 3 wholesalers in the United States. Cardinal Health, AmerisourceBergen, and McKesson Corporation, to the tune of about $472 billion. These wholesalers are 3 of the top 25 on the Fortune 500 list. Wholesalers have very little, if any, incentive to bring down the cost of your drug because by and large, they earn their money as a percentage of the gross drug price. So if the cost of the drug goes up, the gross price of the drug goes up, the revenue the wholesaler will earn goes up as a percentage. A stockist, a warehouser, part of the supply system. Repackager, labeler. And the supply chain itself is generally linear. You have the manufacturer, you go to a warehouse, goes to a wholesaler, warehouse, package, label, warehouse, pharmacy, you finally get your drug. Okay, now we're going to jump over to the payment middleman. How does money move through the system? Dual role for the manufacturer, of course, they supply the drugs, they create the drugs. So the manufacturer is part of both systems. Wholesalers, same thing. Dual role. Insurers. Insurers come into the process because they are generally you are going to have an insurance plan that covers your drugs, and they will be paying at least part of your drug. Then we have marketers, advertisers, PSAOs, rebate aggregators, auditors. And the system starts to look like this. So it went from a nice little, you went to your doctor and ended up in bed a little while later, to something like this, where you're the guy in the corner with his pockets empty and little green dollar signs bleeding out of him, because this whole system is funded by your premium. All right, how did this happen? Marilyn's going to give you a little bit of history on PBMs.
Thanks, Chris. How this happened is in the late 70s, early 80s, insurance companies decided to start operating a pharmacy benefit along with their medical product. And in those days, their systems were set up very well to process medical claims and medical networks. But what about the pharmacies? There were paper claims, things weren't automated, they didn't quite maybe have the necessary skills to be negotiating with drug manufacturers. So PBMs came into the picture. And what they agreed to do is we'll adjudicate those claims for you, we'll set up the systems, and this was in the late 80s. And as we set up those systems, we want to be paid an administrative fee for doing that. And that's where they took over that job. They also set up systems to look for drug interaction issues, looking for refills, safety issues, and came along to be very useful services. But things morphed. As there is money in the system, there became more pull of the money out of the system. And what we saw PBMs do is enter into different practices, which will be covered later. But I want to show you where we are now. We have 3 PBMs that dominate the market. 3 PBMs have 85% of the market, so you've got some monopoly behaviors going on, plus then they partner with insurers, and it's the whole game there. This shows you Express Scripts in revenue. 25 on the Fortune 500 list, CVS Health at $185 billion, Optum RX, Oma United at $201 billion, so that is $486 billion, and well, in the top on Fortune 500 list.
Okay, so now that's the end of the slides. You don't have to watch any more PowerPoint. We're going to leave those up there for you so you can kind of see what we're talking about. Where we're going to go next is we will talk about the rebate game and we will talk about spread pricing. These are some other things we'd like you to know about. We won't have time to cover them today. You want to know more, you can ask. We'll talk to you as soon as you want to. Unfortunately, we're going to say PBM a lot, so I'm going to try to not pop the mic too much, but I can't run out of it. So what we're going to do now is switch from the PowerPoint to this board. I'm going to be drawing pictures. The other staff are going to be outlining the flow of the system. It might be a little clunky, but you'll get it. Hang in there with us, okay? So let me switch here.
All right, so we just told you that the PBM is going to be the linchpin in the system, right? They are controlling quite a bit of this process. And how they do that is they have control of the formulary. The formulary we just told you was a list of prescription drugs that your insurer will cover, right? And there's different tiers for those drugs, what they'll be on, and 1 through 5 as we explained earlier, right? So, the formulary is a crucial piece of this system, and the reason is because we have manufacturers who need to get their drugs onto this formulary so that they can sell them. So we've got a lot of manufacturers, they sell their drugs, they need to get those drugs onto that formulary, and they do it by paying for it. The manufacturer pays to put their drug onto the formulary. And so this is a pay-or-play type of system, and I'm going to let Derek go ahead.
Okay, so one component that I think we need to make sure we put on the board here is we have an insurer First, the insurer is providing this pharmacy benefit. Okay? Now, through a contract with the PBM, they are giving control over formulary design, over which drugs will be covered by that pharmacy benefit. And they're doing that for a fee. And that's all well and good. So the PBM is then charged with designing this formulary. Now, Janelle mentioned that this is a pay-to-play system. Let's walk through an example. We have a bunch of manufacturers trying to sell a product. The product is the drug. Let's say manufacturer one wants to sell their product and they want to have a net profit of $10. Okay. Knowing that this is a pay-to-play system, they're going to offer a payment to the PBM. They're going to start with let's in this example, we'll start with a list price of $100. Now they want to make $10 at the end of the day. So they have to offer a $90 payment. And this payment is called a rebate. We can call it other things. They call it a rebate. Now, there are other manufacturers, okay? Let's say manufacturer number 2 has also determined that they would like to make $10 for a competing product. So they want to make the same amount of money as manufacturer 1. They want to make $10. That's their business model. But they also know they're in competition to get their drug on that formulary, to get the drug to more consumers than the other manufacturer. So what do they do to compete? They're going to offer a larger list price to accommodate a larger rebate payment, whatever you want to call it. They call it a rebate. We have other names for it. If they want to make $10, they're going to offer a $100 payment, rebate, kickback. And this continues onward in an upward trend. It's upward competition. Manufacturer 1 wants to compete with manufacturer number 2. They raise their list price to accommodate a larger rebate. I think Janelle's taking over from me.
All right, so the second manufacturer has the higher rebate and the higher fee. They're going to have they're going to have their drug on the formulary, and they're going to have better placement as far as tiers on that formulary, number 1 spot, right? So we have a list price of $110. What do we do with that? Well, let's go back over to the manufacturer's side, and we're going to talk about the supply chain that we went through on the PowerPoint real briefly. So the manufacturer has a list price of $110 for this drug. The drug needs to get to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler has all of those other middlemen that they need to pay to package the drug, label the drug, and so on. And so they increase the price of that drug from $110 to, let's say, $140. $140, so that all those middlemen can get paid. And that drug needs to get down to the pharmacy, so that pays for the trucking and gets that drug over to the pharmacy, where the pharmacy pays $140 for that drug. That drug is now on the shelf of that pharmacy and ready for the consumer to take home and feel better. And so now we need to go back to the patient. The patient, Joe, we're going to call him Joe. Joe goes to the doctor and gets a prescription. Joe takes his prescription and his insurance card and his $10 copayment to the pharmacy, shows his ID card, pays his $10, takes that prescription drug home, and goes to bed, right? So we have a $140 drug that the pharmacy now has gotten $10 for so far. And we know, the pharmacy knows, that that Joe has insurance. He showed him his insurance card. And so we know that we need to file a claim with the insurance company to get the rest of that payment. And so the way that the pharmacy does this is they have a contract with the PBM. And this is a network contract. It's so that the pharmacy can be a network provider. and it spells out the reimbursement rate for that prescription drug. Now, the reimbursement rate, like we told you before, we have no way of knowing exactly what the dollar amount is. It's going to be based on one of those drug methodologies. It's going to be based on what kind of drug it is, and it's going to change weekly.
Or a lot, or randomly, or we're not exactly sure how frequently it changes.
It changes quite a bit. And so we know that the pharmacy is going to get reimbursed by the PBM for that drug. And we also know that the insurer has another contract with the PBM for those drug claims, right? And that's a contract that spells out how much the insurer is going to pay for each of the drugs that are dispensed. In this case, we have a contract, let's just, for purposes of this example, let's say that the contract between the PBM and the insurer spells out that this particular drug is going to be $260. That's how much they're going to pay for the drug. So the insurer
Every
pays,
time, so
Sorry.
let's just clarify this here. Hopefully you're tracking, but this $260, the insurance company has agreed to pay the PBM every time Joe or somebody like him goes to the pharmacy and gets that drug. So this drug is going to be $260 drug for the insurance company. That's what the insurance company is going to pay, okay? I want to make sure that was clear because it gets a little technical over here.
absolutely. So we understand what the insurance company is paying for the drug. Now we need to understand where the pharmacy gets their money. So, in accordance with their contract with the PBM, they get reimbursed for that drug. And like we said, we don't know exactly how much they get reimbursed. It's going to depend, and it's going to depend on the day that they get the drug, and it's going to depend on what those methodologies say that drug costs. The pharmacy has a pretty good idea of what that drug is going to cost, but they cannot be 100% accurate with this. So, depending on the day, we're just going to say that the drug is $160 reimbursed by the PBM, and it costs them $140. They got their other 10 from the copay. They needed to cover $130. It was a good day for the pharmacy, so they're taking home an extra $30. Right, $30. So they're good for this particular transaction. Now that's all of the days. Some days they're not going to be reimbursed for their cost, and they're going to actually lose money. It really is just going to depend on what those methodologies say is going on at any given time. So we know that this is the spread pricing that we're talking about as one of the bad because the insurance company paid that PBM $260, and they only reimbursed $160 to the pharmacy. They kept that at $100, and that's their spread.
So to shorten this for you in terms of compensation to the PBM. So we showed you that the insurance company has a contract per transaction for the drug. Let's say the administrative fee gives the PBM $5 per every drug transaction. That is transparent. That's pretty transparent. You know that the PBM is providing a service at which they could be compensated at $5, cover their operations, okay? So we have a $5 fee right there. That's what the PBM essentially said by contract they could make and go home with and be happy with. That would be a transparent PBM. But then you saw the PBM influence with the manufacturer. And this rebate game plays out. The rebate then, the winning rebate in this particular case was a $100 rebate. So now the PBM has added $100 outside. I say outside of their contract loosely because the contracts don't prohibit, but. All right, and so you've got $5 here, you've got $100 here, but then you just saw the PBM also take $100 from the pharmacy, or not share it, or some other way you want to say it. So on a $5 transaction, The PBM made $205. That is the reason at least one of the big reasons, that we have $486 billion running through some very large major PBMs, okay? I'm hoping that makes some sense. Now, who paid for this? Who paid for this? Anybody? Who paid for this? Joe paid for this. That's right, Representative. So this entire system, every single middleman, every single provider, every single everything, was paid for by Joe's premium that he paid to the insurance company. So, any questions?
How do you become a PBM?
I woke up in the middle of the night thinking, how is that PBM? Okay, before I take your questions, just a second, real quick. I want to explain the bill, just briefly, Senate Bill 71. Now, we've told you that Senator Fitzpatrick's bill is a component of the transparency on this part of the system. There's a couple bills in the process that are discussing Canadian imports, that kind of idea. That would address maybe this part of the system. We've got, I think, Representative Sullivan's bill models the bill that went through Oregon. That takes a piece here of the transparency system. But none of these bills, all good bills, bringing light, shedding light, or I won't say good bills, but bills we're working with because they definitely have a role to play. But all those bills do help put eyes on the system. But the bill that we drafted at the auditor's office because of this research that Senator Shepsey's carrying, Senate Bill 71, is the only one that addresses the cost, that actually hits the numbers, that will actually see the system reduce healthcare costs. Does that make sense? Everybody tracking with that? Okay, and you guys are going to start hearing, probably already started hearing, counter arguments to this proposition. You've started hearing that this isn't really going to work. You've started hearing that the PBMs don't do this. None of these practices exist. Sorry, you don't get to 486 billion that quick on $5 a script. So we want to tell you a story. Marilyn's going to come and tell you the story about how she actually fired a PBM because they were doing this and wouldn't just do it right here for a contracted fee. We know this works, we know it can work. And so she's going to tell you the story real quick and then we'll wrap up. Take your questions.
Thanks, Chris. I have been the administrator of the state employee health plan, and I assumed that position in the end of 2014, and you had passed Senate Bill 418 and said, get these costs under control. So one of the areas we looked at was pharmacy benefit. And what we found when I looked at the pharmacy benefit was trying to get to the contracts. And once I saw the contract, and the PBMs will tell you, well, you signed the contract. You know, we're not in trouble here. We're doing what you told us to. That's partially true because you are signing that contract, but many of the terms aren't in it. So what I did was do an RFP. And I said, I tried to work with our current PBM and rebate aggregators, several middlemen in the system. There were 7 contracts. And as I worked through it, I saw all the money coming out by all the middlemen. So I said, I want a transparent pass-through benefit. I don't want any spread pricing. I want to know that what I pay you from the taxpayer money in the state health plan to you PBM is the same amount you give the pharmacy, and I want to be able to audit it. The second thing I said is I want these rebates to come back to the plan. Now, you do a wonderful service. I'm not here to argue that PBMs don't do a good service in looking at the drug interaction, the safety, helping to get drugs out in the market, pre-authorization. And I want to pay you an administrative fee because you really, we need you. We need to partner with you with all the things that PBM does well. So I will pay you an admin fee. That's Chris had the $5 there. But I want that other money to come back to me. And I was really surprised. We did find a PBM that had this model. We went with it. My admin fees were lower than my admin fees have been before. And we saved the state health plan $7.4 million that first year on a spend of $32 million. Because we got rid of those two pieces and we put in the ability to audit. And I'm very pleased to say that with that PBM, others have joined, the university system joined that, other private employers have joined that, and 31,000 members from the state health plan. But that particular PBM is closing in on close to 100,000 members now throughout the state of Montana with private employers. So we did this model with the state. We found a PBM that would play the game, that worked for us, and they're compensated fairly for all the good things they do.
Does that make sense to everybody? We have a real life example that almost all of you are probably on the state health insurance plan that provides you a prescription, and the state plan, in part because of this process being incorporated into it, has been able to hold state employee premium to the same level for at least 3 years. This does work. There is superfluous money in the system. And so just briefly, I told you that the legislation will address the spread pricing and the legislation will address the rebate in bulk. That's the emphasis of the legislation, I guess I would say. But what we're doing, the way we're doing this, is that we are telling the insurers that by contract, they have to require that the rebate money and the spread money, if there is any, comes back to the insurer to be put into premium reduction. That's the mechanism of how we do this in the bill. So we are directly regulating the insurer and telling them their contracts have to eliminate this kind of stuff. So it's pretty simple. It's not even very long, but it's about 12 pages, maybe. But that is what it will do. So, questions? You guys have been a good audience, and that went pretty well. So we've got 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll jump out of here in a minute because everybody else is smarter than me on the details. But, sir, you in the back have been waiting.
Less a question, more a comment. I wanted to circle back to Joe's situation. Joe is actually in that situation only paying his $5. The real payer is the state, our taxes going to pay for employees, as well as employers paying for their employees. As those premiums rise, as employers, we're less likely to give raises, to inject that money back in the economy, and the same thing goes for the state. If more tax dollars go to paying for health insurance premiums, there's less money available for infrastructure and what have you. I'm in the pharmacy business, I'm also an employer, so I understand this. But by further removing the end user, the consumer, from this process, we're just buying into the whole complicated system, and simplifying it as you've done here is the first step. So I applaud your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. We do, I'll follow up with some reason when we said you guys are all aware that when we passed the legislation that told, did you guys stop back? I'm wondering like what's coming. All right, but when we, this body, and at the time I was voting with you all too, I think in 2013 or 15, passed the legislation that told the state health plan that it was going bankrupt and it had to turn around. That bill was actually contingent. The state employees' raises that session were actually contingent upon her being able to do this because the state couldn't afford both. So your point is well taken. It is true. Employers all over the state are having to decide whether they can pay for more health insurance premiums, cut benefits, or give raises, and that is part of what we're trying to fix. Next question. Questions?
More applause?
Yeah. Senator.
Why aren't there more PBMs?
There are.
I'd love to talk that one. There are a lot more PBMs. Now you've got 3 dominating the market, and we've got good sales materials linking also with insurance companies. That's their product, and there's a lot of money. There are numerous PBMs out there that do these models like out of the state. We only had one PBM when we did our RFP that was truly what we wanted, but there are many, many more. We have been in contact with at least 5. I think 2 or 3 will be flying out here to testify. I was just at a conference in Las Vegas and met 2 more. There are plenty of PBMs coming up in the middle market. It's that middle market that can do this.
I'll just say as well that there's more market opportunities for these PBMs. As of Tuesday this week, the largest corporation in the United States just fired their PBM. Walmart just fired CVS Caremark. So there's some recognition across the nation that this transparent pass-through model that we're advocating for here is the way to go.
Before I let you go, I do want to point out, or take more questions too, but I do want to point out another thing that's pretty significant. We wrote this legislation. You guys will hear about NCOIL models, you'll hear about NCSL models, you'll hear about various private organizations, nonprofits that have model legislation. We, generally speaking, are aware of all of those, have been working with each one of those organizations. We've done side-by-side comparisons of most of those bills. And we are pretty much deeply involved nationwide in the discussion about how to do this. There are a couple other considerations that you should be aware of. You've probably seen around the country, various states like Arkansas, some other states, tried to pass legislation to directly regulate PBMs, just like bam. All of those cases, at least one is still in the appeals process, but in all of those cases, the legislation was thrown out because the federal government has the ERISA law, and the ERISA law governs benefit plans. And the PBMs go to court, sue states, and say you can't pass this legislation because the federal government has preempted you. So only the feds can touch anything that touches a health plan. So we started out with one of those types of bills, and we were trying to thread the needle, like how do we get around that ERISA preemption? We can't, everybody else has fallen on their faces, but maybe we can fix it, right? And then we sat down at the table and said, we can't fix it either. If we ask our legislators to pass this legislation, it's gonna fail, and we're gonna go to court, and we're just gonna have legal bills to defend, and we're gonna lose anyway. And so I asked these two to go back to the drawing board and find a way. So the 2 of them wrote this whole cloth, figured it out, decided this was the best way we could do it under the law, and we've got states all around the country calling us and asking us to come present this. So I want you to know, as Montana legislators, that this has been deemed groundbreaking, even by one of our esteemed friends that's usually in the gallery. There he is. This is different. It's outside the norm, and we've been working hard on it. We've also worked very hard with our insurers, and I want to tell you they've all worked with us. I'm not trying to slam that. They've all provided good feedback. But the fact of the matter is that when push comes to shove, and the nuts and bolts of the matter is this system is operating this way. It's hurting Montana consumers, and we think this legislation will make a dent. It's going to be a fight, but that's where we are.
What are the arguments against it? What are you going to do? What are we going to do as legislators?
I'd like to talk to that. You're going to hear from the PBMs. We do wonderful things. We have safety features. We do all these great things. I'm not arguing that, and I pay an admin fee for that. But what they'll say is, well, clients like Spread. They really like Spread because it's predictable. They know that they will always pay $260 for the drug. But what happens is the insurance company doesn't know the other part of that transaction. You don't get to see that contract. You don't know what the pharmacy is paying. There was just a report coming out from a pharmacist in Iowa that just happened. He was a pharmacist, and he is, and he was reading the classified and the notices that are in the paper. And he saw that there was an antipsychotic drug that is sold to counties, and it was, in this case, was the prison system. And he said, wow, they say that the county has to pay $198 for that. And he said, but I know I only get less than $6. So he went back and he looked at it, and then he tried to find out why, and the PBM kept slamming him. You have no right to know. The contract that you signed here, you said you would take that price for it. You have no right to know. And if you call them to try to figure out what's going on, you're going to be sued by us. And so and you've seen different reports come out with that spread pricing. What was the question? I went off on that. Oh, you're going to hear spread pricing. Spread pricing is good because it gives the person stability. And there are some different people in this audience that work with employers on the broker agent that will have probably heard those stories. I challenge that. Fine, that's okay. But tell them what you're paying. The insurer doesn't know what they're paying on that. And as far on rebates, they'll say, oh, we've negotiated these great rebates so we can keep drug prices down. No, in this argument, I say, let's go to the $10.
Yeah.
On that, and you're going to hear the great things they do. You're going to hear that, you're going to hear they're broke, and they operate on a very, very minimal thing.
You're also going to hear this one say that it's this one's fault, and this one say that it's this one's fault, and this one say that it's that one's fault, and that one say that it's that one's fault. That you will hear that constantly. And for your information, we are aware we have not plugged the hole in every part of the system. There are some unsavory practices with the wholesalers. Timing of when they release quantities of drugs. Can they cause a shortage on purpose to drive a price up? There are lots of other practices that are happening with the system. We didn't have time nor the wherewithal to get it all done at once. This is what we were able to do, but you will hear other players in this industry say, no, it's the wholesaler. Well, yeah, it is the wholesaler, but it's also you. So let's start somewhere.
So I don't know if this is possible, and I guess I'll ask Marilyn, but when you did the RFP, do the PBMs, do you think it's a possibility when they see something like this that they'll use the formulary to pressure certain parts of the system?
Oh,
like,
yes, absolutely. The one that they're going to get the most rebate on. And they definitely do that. It's the game. And they'll tell you, but you signed this contract. You gave over your rights to me to manage this. I'm just doing what you contractually signed for.
But you don't see them getting together inclusion and using that to
I'm
make
not
this
going to say
work.
what we see or don't see yet. We see something new every single day. Every single day, somebody like you comes and says, have you looked at this yet? And we're like, we got a list this long. We're still looking. I can't answer all the questions. So,
And there's a lot of vertical integration in the system. When you're talking about CVS, Walmart purchasing Aetna, a large health insurer, why would they be doing that?
Sorry, Senator Holm, just for a second. One of the other things we didn't think we'd have time to talk to you about here is, ideally the system was created to compete. There's supposed to be competition in the system. But like Derek just said, the mergers, the acquisitions, the buyouts, all of this stuff that's going on right now, you've got one guy owning the entire thing, and they're not getting rid of the middlemen. So it's like you buy the whole system and then keep all of the kickbacks, all the everything that's part of the system. So none of these players go away. They just all are owned by the same place. It's yeah.
The PBMs make all this money. They don't make the drug. They never touch the drug, and they make all this money. And we're shedding light on some of the ways that they do that.
The manufacturers are taking a lot of heat for high drug prices, but they get a very low amount. Why don't the manufacturers put pressure on the other people?
That's a very interesting question, and Chris
And they're not innocent, but go ahead.
Yeah, they're not innocent. Everybody in this middleman thing, starting from this side on over, everybody's taking a piece of the pie. And they're not innocent in this at all. We were we were in Maine, Chris and I were in Maine, and we were speaking with some people from Merck, the drug manufacturing company. And they are kind of moving the target to the PBMs too. And one of the things that's interesting is how the drug manufacturers all tend to sit on those PBM committees to determine what drugs are going to be covered or not. And she she opposed what we were saying, and she said, we have to have a seat at that table or we're not going to get put on the formulary. So there's games being played there, and I don't think the drug manufacturers are innocent. It's interesting, if you look at the EpiPen issue where it started selling for $608, the big issue, you had the PBMs and insurers coming out and yelling at the drug manufacturers. You have the drug manufacturers turn around and produce information to show of that $608, they only were at $270. They started pointing the fingers at the other ones. But the worst part is you don't know, because it's not transparent. You don't know where the money went on that.
This seems like it would be a nonpartisan problem. So
We sure
when
hope
this is
so.
something,
Yeah, we agree.
I'm looking around.
We've got representatives and senators from both sides of the aisle talking to us about this. We've got several of you guys carrying your own legislation, like we mentioned a little while ago, that fits into the system somewhere, puts eyes on the system somewhere. And Representative, you, as I started the presentation, I said this was the third highest ranked study by the legislature last time when we started. I think everybody is feeling the pressure to make something happen. So this is, and for everybody's information, this is our first introduction of this. So we haven't been able to get with everybody and tell everybody what we're doing, but this is how we're starting that process, and hopefully we'll be able to get through to everybody. This is good stuff. But there will be pushback. The corporations don't want to give up this money, so we're going to need a bipartisan effort to put a hold on this.
And what advice do you have for us, if anything?
Okay, listen, thank you all so much for coming out today. Please, we've left the contact information up for the office so that you can continue to gather more information as you get more questions. There's a lot of money involved in the pharmaceutical industry. There is going to be a lot of people trying to get you to support opposition to this legislation. I'm not even kidding myself. I know that there's going to be a lot of opposition to it simply because of the number of dollars that are involved in this process. But if we are going to make some strides, some steps towards reducing the cost of health care, this is where we have to start. These folks have got, again, this entire process shrouded in darkness, and it gives them all plausible deniability. They point at each other, and we have identified where the money is being abused in the system. And if you will help us, then we will help the citizens of Montana. Thank you so much for coming out.